Welcome to Lesson 22.1, What is a Plant? In this lesson, we'll describe what plants need to survive, describe how the first plants evolved, and explain the process of alternation of generations. Traditionally, plants are classified as members of the kingdom Plantae. Plants are eukaryotes that have a cell wall containing cellulose and carry out photosynthesis using chlorophyll A and B. Plant leaves appear green due to the photosynthetic pigments chlorophyll A and B, which are located in the chloroplasts. What do plants need to survive? The lives of plants center on the need for sunlight, gas exchange, water, and minerals. How are sunlight and carbon dioxide used by the plant? They are used to carry out photosynthesis. Plants use the energy from sunlight to carry out photosynthesis. Every plant displays adaptations shaped by the need to gather sunlight. Photosynthetic organs such as leaves are typically broad and flat and are arranged on the stem so as to maximize light. Plants require oxygen to support cellular respiration and require carbon dioxide to carry out photosynthesis. They also need to release oxygen made during photosynthesis. Plants must exchange these gases with the atmosphere and the soil without losing excessive amounts of water through evaporation. What is the purpose of photosynthesis? Plants use this process to make their own food. On a hot sunny day, plants can lose a great deal of water to the air, just as we sweat when we're hot. Water is one of the raw materials of photosynthesis, so it is consumed when the sun is shining. Thus, land plants have evolved structures that limit water loss and speed the uptake of water from the ground. Minerals are nutrients in the soil needed for plant growth. Many plants have specialized tissues that carry water and nutrients upward from the soil and distribute the products of photosynthesis throughout the plant body. Simpler types of plants carry out these functions by diffusion. For most of Earth's history, land plants simply did not exist. Life was concentrated in oceans, lakes, and streams. Although photosynthetic prokaryotes added oxygen to Earth's atmosphere and provided food for animals and microorganisms, true plants had not yet appeared on the planet. The fossil record indicates that the ancestors of today's plants were water-dwelling organisms similar to today's green algae. Fossil spores of land plants occur in rocks 475 million years old, but the plants themselves from this time period left no fossils. The oldest fossils of land plants themselves are found roughly 50 million years later in the fossil record. This fossil shows the branched stalks that bore reproductive structures at their tips. The greatest challenge that early land plants faced was obtaining water, which they achieved by growing close to the ground in damp locations. Fossils also suggest that the first true land plants were still dependent on water to complete their life cycles. How did plants adapt to life on land? Over time, the demands of life on land favored the evolution of plants more resistant to the drying rays of the sun and more capable of conserving water. The evolution of land plants also favored those capable of reproducing without water. Botanists divide the plant kingdom into 5 major groups based on 4 important features: embryo formation, specialized water-conducting tissues, seeds, and flowers. Let's take a look at this cladogram. In which plant group did seeds first evolve? Since seeds appeared here, the first plant group that had seeds would be the cone-bearing plants. What key feature does a fern have in common with a flowering plant? Ferns and flowering plants both have true water-conducting tissues and embryo formation. Let's take a look at the number of plant species. The flowering plants contain 260,000 species, being the most common group of plants. The smallest group of plants are the cone-bearing plants, having only 800 species. Plant scientists classify plants into finer groups within these major branches by comparing the DNA sequences of various species. What feature defines most plant life cycles? The life cycle of land plants has two alternating phases, a diploid or 2N phase and a haploid or N phase. This shift between haploid and diploid is known as the alternation of generations. The multicellular diploid phase is known as the sporophyte or spore-producing plant. The multicellular haploid phase is known as the gametophyte or gamete-producing plant. Haploid organisms carry a single set of chromosomes in their cell nuclei, while diploid organisms have two sets of chromosomes. The sporophyte produces haploid spores through meiosis. These spores grow into multicellular structures called gametophytes. Each gametophyte produces reproductive cells called gametes, sperm and egg cells. During fertilization, eggs fuse with sperm, producing a diploid zygote. The zygote develops into a new sporophyte and the cycle begins again. Which generation of a plant is diploid and which is haploid? The sporophyte generation is diploid and the gametophyte generation is haploid. Why does it make sense that the sporophyte generation is diploid? Because sporophytes form when two haploid gametes fuse. What does the sporophyte produce? It produces spores. What process produces spores? Meiosis. Are the spores diploid or haploid? They are haploid. This illustration shows an important trend in plant evolution: the decreasing size of the gametophyte and the increasing size of the sporophyte. Although many green algae do have a diploid sporophyte phase, some do not. Their only multicellular bodies are gametophytes. Mosses and their relatives consist of a relatively large gametophyte and a smaller sporophyte. Ferns and their relatives have a small gametophyte and a larger sporophyte. Seed plants have an even smaller gametophyte than ferns, which is contained within sporophyte tissues. How does the relative size of the haploid and diploid stages differ between mosses and seed plants? Mosses have a relatively large gametophyte, but seed plants have the smallest gametophyte of all plant groups. Mosses have smaller sporophytes than seed plants. Plants need sunlight. They conduct gas exchange, releasing excess oxygen while also taking in oxygen and taking in carbon dioxide. Plants require water for photosynthesis, and they utilize minerals. Advantages for land plants included resistant to drying, conserving water, and reproducing without water. Plants undergo an alternation of generations between a diploid and haploid phase.